Okay, I think we're good to go. All right, I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is David McBain. I am this year's uh, chair for the Edmonton Young Professionals Group. And today we're having an event for everybody on teamwork, collaboration, and a bit of information on integrated project delivery, also known as IPDs. So today we have Thomas Ziegler and Stephanie Carter talking. First, we're going to start with Thomas. Thomas is a professional engineer with Altera Engineering. So he has been involved with a multitude of projects, including some integrated project delivery projects. So he has vast experience working with teams of different backgrounds, different disciplines, etc. He also was the Edmonton uh, Young Professional Chair a few years ago. So he's been involved with many CEA Young Professional events. And here he is to talk a bit about teamwork and collaboration from his experience. Off to you, Thomas.
Thanks so much, David. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us in discussion around collaboration and IPD. It's really an excellent kind of project environment to be working with, one that leverages collaboration. There's a lot of different components to it, and Stephanie's going to go into a lot of, I think, more detail than I will on those kinds of components. But I wanted to take a couple moments to introduce and share a few perspectives on integrated project delivery and collaboration from the perspective of a young professional. I myself am still a YP. It feels like a long time ago since I graduated in 2013. But as CEA defines, less than 10 years experience, still a YP. And it's been an amazing ride being involved in IPD projects and teams that are high performing, that exhibit some higher qualities of collaboration. And as David noted, I've participated in a number of different IPD projects, predominantly with Edmonton Public Schools. And so those are commonly multidisciplinary teams that are replacing, maybe replacing a building, or maybe it's a greenfield development school, but where the aspects of IPD and collaboration have been leveraged and maximized and really kind of generate some pretty amazing results. So the points that I'd like to just jump through, and I don't want to take up too much time, leave Stephanie to do most of the talking here, but I wanted to relay a few points, as I mentioned, specific to the perspectives of a YP. Collaboration itself, there's a lot of different techniques and tools to realize collaboration and to make it happen. But there are a number of different behaviors and of different attitude components that I think are really, really important to bear in mind as you approach collaboration on a project. And that as a YP, that we bring some, either a step backwards or a few points of affirmation, or maybe some things that you can learn about and try and develop as you try and engage collaboration. So first, what I wanted to affirm is in collaboration, collaboration is particularly effective when you know yourself. This is quite a personal topic. I mean this both in an individual way of you in your own leadership and your own individual nature, but also professionally. You need to know yourself in those components. So that may include being aware of, maybe it's trying to look into different forms of leadership. How do you take action? How do you lead and relate to people? Personally, I've had a few books that have been really helpful, focusing on strengths-based leadership. And also maybe it's a personality typing system that can help you understand more about yourself and understand more about others. Personally, I found a lot of use coming to that to me out of digging in through, it's called the Enneagram. A little bit lesser known platform, but I find it really engages a very holistic element to an individual and a person. But maybe use Myers-Briggs or DISC or any of the other multitudes of personality typing systems that can help you learn about yourselves and others. The other component about knowing yourself, as mentioned, is professionally, and in particular to your role as in your discipline. If you're a designer, specific to what hat you wear on a team. So for myself as a civil engineer, I work predominantly in land development. There's a lot of common areas that are attributed to the civil engineer. It'd be drainage, it'd be grading, servicing, road construction, that kind of stuff. I always say for a school site, it's stuff I hope nobody ever notices, but that's what I have to take care of as a civil engineer. But in an IPD or a collaboration project where you're working in a high-performing team, it may not always make the most sense for the traditional role to take action on a particular area. So that may mean that maybe if there's a specific area that, for myself as a civil engineer, maybe the landscape architect needs to take a closer look, or the architect themselves, or maybe even some of our trade partners can actually provide a significant amount of information and experience and knowledge to a topic that if I know myself, I know when I need to take a step back or when I need to lean in. Those are definitely key components to having effective collaboration. Next component of collaboration that I want to affirm for young professionals is that team collaboration is best leveraged when you have a common goal and a common direction. This often looks like defining project success. That usually for an IPD project includes a fairly intensive process with the owner, with stakeholders, users, the design team, the constructors, and the outcome of all of these different processes to come up with project success really delivers a unifying direction and a unifying voice. But the thing that I find amazing about being involved in those kinds of projects as a young professional is that I actually have a lot to share. I have a lot to invest in what it looks like to realize project success. Not too often that someone actually asks me, what does project success look like for you? And that gets me excited because I love what I do, and there's a reason that I do what I do, and I believe that I do what I do quite well. And I want people to know, often to know that, but in an IPD and a collaboration centered project, there's an opportunity to really lean in and provide that. And as a YP, by all means, you are invited to provide that input. And that I find is amazing, especially in light of growing generational trend, what a lot of folks refer to as millennials, that we are maybe, there's some differences on how you can view the different actions and initiatives that the different generations or angles that they tend to take on their work. But one thing that I find really fascinating about millennials is that we expect a lot from our work environments. We expect a lot from our projects. And that, to me, the way that I articulate that is that YPs want to integrate their purpose, their why, with their work. And that is realized in some pretty powerful ways on IPD and high collaborative projects. And that to me is fascinating. So I just affirm that point to you as fellow IPs, or as if you're a more senior professional, just in those generational differences, that there is a huge wealth of information that we have that we can offer and that we can bring to the table and be confident in bringing that. The other component that I would like to relate relating to collaboration is that effective collaboration at its core is highly relational. It's about having relationships with people. And going back to some of the points there about knowing yourself, there's some important realizations that I want to affirm to all of you, that there are behavioral traits that can be prohibitive to collaboration. And maybe it's a way that people might speak, or a way that we might solicit information from others. I know myself, I've had to work on becoming more teachable. Personally, that's something that I've had to develop. But as I've worked and been aware of these various components, it allows me to build a deeper level of trust with all of the different project partners. So that might look like developing a relationship with our contractors or the other team members, other consultants, maybe even the owner. And once those relationships are in place, collaboration is it's such a rewarding experience when those relationships are in place. So that's something that I would really affirm, that there are things to be aware of don't do's. It may look like about being availability. If you're not available to speak into a project or speak into something, if you're waiting for someone to invite you, collaboration really requires people to take initiative and to be invested and engaged to a process. Similarly, team culture is such an incredible component of collaboration. Some people view it as an outcome of collaboration, but it really is a key component of collaboration, not just an outcome, but something that you have to work on and invest and develop. And when we don't foster that, there are consequences, but when you do foster that, it's these are some of the best projects that I've ever worked on. If I can be biased one project to another, which is maybe a risky thing to say as a designer, but I am biased to recognize that the highly collaborative projects are some of the most satisfying and rewarding projects to be involved with. So just in closing those couple of points, I wanted to relate that these are some specific lenses that you can be aware of. As I mentioned at the start, there are a lot of different techniques and tools that are used in collaboration, but common in all of those are some of those behavioral traits that as YPs, I encourage each of you to be aware of, and ways that you may even possess a lot more wealth and knowledge and investment to a project team and to the overall outcome and success of a project than you may realize. So I hope that affirmation just gives you that extra little bit of energy to try and take collaboration to the next level in your projects. And I think in closing, I also recognize that diversity in highly collaborative projects is almost, it's basically synonymous. In order to have a highly collaborative and highly effective project, having diverse teams are incredibly important. So I encourage you as you are growing in your personal and professional development and you're learning more about yourself, learn about what makes you tick. What are the angles that you have that a project really needs to receive? And as you learn to speak up on those things and speak up in a way that that supports and strengthens your team members around you, you'll find that that your voice is highly valued in those environments, and that's how diversity is realized in each of those spaces. So those would be the points that I'd like to relate. I hope that there's something there that you find useful. Those are some of the learning points that from my first IPD project and collaboration I've been learning about for a long time. We collaborate with people at work, but in IPD projects, those are some of the key learning points that I've had to be engaged in and be learning in myself, and that I hope will provide some benefit to you.
Great.
With that, David, I'll let you introduce Stephanie. I've actually had the pleasure of working with Stephanie on a number of IPD projects. I'm really excited for what she has to share. So thanks for your time. Back to you, David.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. Yeah, I really liked what you said about merging your why with your work. I think that really applies to a lot of us, and especially being consultants and the relationships that we built. So thank you again. And next up, we have Stephanie Carter. So she's our keynote speaker today. So she is the owner, general manager, and project director of Eco Ammo, which is a firm that helps with high performance facilitation and training, as well as green building design and construction. So she has vast experience with teamwork, collaboration, as well as breaking down the more traditional borders in working on projects. And one thing I really want to say right now too is that if you have any questions, there's a Q&A tab that you can ask your questions in. The questions can be directed to both Thomas or Stephanie or both. And at the very end, we'll be going through the Q&A section of this, and we'll answer the questions. So off to you, Stephanie, and thank you again.
Thanks so much, David. Wow, Thomas, that was such a great intro. I feel like I'm probably going to cover more of the technical, nerdy stuff, but you are absolutely right. It's about learning about yourself, sharing about the skill sets you have. Some other people might have 40 years in the industry, but you do, as a young person, have things you can share, especially if you know yourself. You're a detail-oriented person, or whatever it is. And culture really does make a difference. And that was fantastic, Thomas. I too have really enjoyed working with Thomas. He's our go-to guy, and yeah, it's been great. So I will just share my screen and we'll get started. So when I was asked to come speak to you guys. Actually, first of all, I want to say I'm trying out new inclusive tools in some of my presentations. So if you see words at the bottom, that's a way to include people that might have hard of hearing. It may or may not work entirely correct, so I hope it doesn't distract too many people, but I'm trying something new. So when I was first asked to speak to your group, the question was how to improve on collaboration. And I just want to modify that slightly and speak about the why. So why should we improve collaboration on a project? And then I'll kind of get to some of the how. And a little backstory on myself. I am the owner of EcoAmmo. We kind of combine our focus on high-performing teams and high-performing buildings. And so we've specialized in sustainable buildings. We've done over 200 high-performance projects. We have 13 IPD projects under our belt and 6 collaborative trust-based design, build, or construction managed type projects. And we are lean professionals. And if you don't know what lean is, I can tell you in the Q&A after. But it's I'll tell you a little bit about it in the presentation, but won't go into much of it. So yeah, why we as a sustainability company focus on lean and IPD is because we see that being more effective with the funds of a client can get the client more of what they want in the budget they have, and we believe that that should be sustainability. So first of all, because I don't know you guys, but I'm gonna assume because of the title of this group, Young Professionals, that maybe you're newer to the industry, and I'm just gonna paint a picture of what is conventional. Typical projects predominantly are delivered using a process called design, bid, build. And as you can see in this graphic, you know, preliminary concept happens, there's a design, and then the design is detailed, then we bid on it, and then we construct it. So design, bid, build. And that's used a lot, especially in government public sector projects. But conventional statistics, which I know this is a lot of words, so I'll only pull out a few things. You can read this later and with the copy. But conventional statistics show that there is issues with this process, with 70% of projects behind schedule or over budget, and a lot of waste in our effectiveness of use of materials or labor. Even a large part of the cost of the project can lie in specialty trades, and those people aren't brought in until the very end of a project, and they only see a small section of the big picture. So there's an issue there. And then I only could find statistics from the States on arbitration and litigation, but there is quite a few projects that go that way. And I am fortunate to work with a mentor right now who started all of this collaboration stuff, and he said back in the day, it wasn't called design, bid, build, it was called design, bid, litigate. So we have come some way from then, but there's a lot more to do. This slide is showing the gap between the productivity in manufacturing, the increase in productivity, and the kind of stagnation in construction. You know, it's our time in our industry to pull up our boots and find all those inefficiencies and become more effective as a team. And there's a lot of opportunity there. Another aspect of what the current state is, which you guys are probably familiar with, but maybe you haven't seen it presented this way, it's not related to the construction market, but it is something the construction market should be aware of. As a sustainability professional, I like to talk about this as much as I can. The city of Edmonton is actually quite a leader in this area. They have taken the Paris Accord, they have taken the understanding of how many greenhouse gas emissions Edmonton proper has left to emit. It is a budget, and they've calculated how much greenhouse gas emissions have to be reduced by when in order to mitigate the 2-degree increase and the 1.5-degree increase. And 2020, we should be about 43% below 2017. And by 2030, in 10 years, 80%. And that's just to meet 2 degrees, not 1.5. So when you take that and apply it to buildings, because this is GHGs for everything, transportation, the whole lot, that's like really an impressive mountain we all have to climb. And how do we get there? I will tell you how a more collaborative project can help you get there. So the 3 things I want to focus on today are contract, culture, and process. And these 3 different areas are key components for improving collaboration on a project. So I'm starting with a contract, and usually contract admin is like boring, like the most boring thing. But hopefully I won't, put you guys to sleep. You may have worked in different contract models. There's stipulated price, there's construction managed, design bid build, and the CCDC, which is the organization that puts out Canadian construction contracts, has released one for IPD. So it is a formally recognized process. And on a spectrum of collaborative to not so collaborative, I've just made this graphic, and it really is off my experience and conversations with others and research and a bunch of different things, but it's not a scientific graphic. So design bid build is definitely more siloed. I'll explain how come. Then design build and construction manage, I would say, is more in the middle, and integrated project delivery is kind of a paradigm shift. And if you haven't seen this graphic, it is called the McLeamy curve or graph. And what it is showing is that the cost of changes, that's that red line, increases dramatically once you start to get into construction. So conventional projects, which is the dotted purple line, kind of cross over the increase in costs where people are still making changes, versus a more preferred design process would be to shove all of the decisions as much as you can into that early phase so that it doesn't cost the owner as much. And when we look at design bid build, by the nature of the contract, we hire the contractor once the design is complete. And so they really don't have the ability to be asking questions upfront. So this is how contract can enable collaboration or not. The design bid build contract definitely constrains that early involvement, and then thus the only way that those contractors have the ability to share their knowledge is through things like change orders, which every owner does not want to hear that word. So other contractual models that will allow people to ask questions early is construction managed, design build, and of course IPD. And this is another comparative between conventional and a process called target value design, which you can use on any collaborative delivery method, not just IPD, but it is definitely a foundation of the IPD process. So as I mentioned earlier, on a conventional project, owner goes to designer. There's a bit of cost estimating there from square foot costs, maybe historical data. And then, the team designs all the details. And then oftentimes once we go to price it, there has to be some sort of value engineering, which is a fancy term for cutting things out, which means the client isn't getting all of what they want. And then oftentimes documentations have gaps or mistakes. And then of course that leads to change orders once you're going to actually get pricing and build the project with the GC. The collaborative target process is that we actually start with the budget. We start with a number. The client says, this is how much money I have. The team all comes together and then discusses scope and pricing, including trades, and everybody gets to a point through the discussion where they feel like, yeah, I think we could build this building with that scope for this amount of money. And then we lock in that price, and then the team designs to a price. And so that all the questions are happening early, and we have a shared goal, as Thomas said earlier, where our goal is the scope and the price, and we're designing to that, and then we're constructing to that. So I changed the angle of this arrow because I really do feel that there's a bit of inertia that is helping IPD projects, and maybe when you're doing design build, but you want to be more collaborative, you're still kind of fighting an uphill battle, because the contracts on an IPD project actually tie everybody together as one entity, and we share in a profit pool. So if things go wrong, we're forced to work it out together, because we are all win or we will all fail. Versus a design, build, and construction manager, there's still different parties, have their own profit, have their own interest. And so you can do so many wonderful things to increase the collaboration on a project through culture and through engagement, but you still have the fact that if something goes wrong, there could be pointing fingers for people to retain their own profits. And of course, the current game for winning a project is to win the bid, which is why we have a race to the bottom and lowest bid wins right now. Versus IPD has a framework that actually changes that game to incentivize the things that the client wants, you know, to incentivize schedule and quality and budget. And just a tiny bit about how the profit pool works. If we're all ahead of schedule, because time is money, the mobilization cost to just be on a site sometimes can be $500,000 a month. So if we're on site less, there's more money in the pool. And that money then gets put back into more value for the client. And then whatever is left, the team can share in extra profits. But if we don't talk to each other, we don't collaborate, we're late, there's mistakes, we're miscommunicating, then it eats into that profit pool. But the great thing about the IPD framework is that your cost, your direct cost, is not at risk. You will get paid for that. It's only the profit that's at risk. So another quick comparison, again, this is not a scientific comparison. This was an evaluation we did for a client on the different methodologies. On the top line is design, bid, build. The middle line is construction, managed, fast tracked, and the bottom line is IPD. You may not be able to see this, but there are several different little purple diamonds, and those indicate the points at which the team is checking on the cost, checking on the scope. And as you can see, there's many more diamonds up front for IPD. This is following the, if anybody knows what a lean startup is, it's kind of the same thing. You want to fail fast. You want to have a whole bunch of go, no goes to protect the client from risk of going too far, spending too much before they realize, oh, I can't afford to build this building. And what that's called is giving the client a sense of cost certainty. And usually cost certainty on a design bid build happens when you actually price it at the market at tender. And with IPD, as I was saying earlier, we do that, we get to cost certainty a lot sooner. And the cost of getting to cost certainty, because there's time involved in people figuring that out, is a lot less too. So the months to get there is less, and also the cost to get there is less. And that's really great for clients who are trying to get funding for their project. So they want to know, how much is this building going to cost? How much do I have to raise? And of course, then on the other side, because of the shared goal of the budget and the scope, and then the lean improvements, we can really shrink the actual construction time as well. And this isn't, this is metadata. So, you know, it's not just me saying this. There's a bunch of, you know, IPD projects around the world, and it's through a bunch of different people researching these projects. You know, it shows that the design related changes are much less in IPD. That's the little green graph on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, RFIs, or requests for information, during the construction period is also a lot less. And this is because we're all talking at the very beginning. This all just makes sense. It's logical, right? But somehow our processes have just been different forever. So these are some of the statistics, again, from those people who research IPD. And it shows, the delta is quite big between 70% behind schedule and 74% ahead of schedule. One of the ones that I really am proud of is that 80% greater customer satisfaction. That means, all that value engineering where we're cutting stuff out, that's a lot reduced, or they get more of what they want. So, there's a lot of statistics from the data that show that IPD does help. And our projects also have shown that it works too. If you ever want to take a tour of the Mosaic Center in Edmonton, it is one of Alberta's first attempts at commercial net zero energy. It's LEED Platinum. It was built at market rate. It had 0 change orders, and it was 5% below budget and 4 months ahead of schedule. We're doing a lot of projects for the Edmonton Public School Board. They're basically moving ahead with, most, if not all, of their projects using IPD because of the experience they've had. This project was 2% below budget, 4 months ahead of schedule again, 0 change orders. 100% of the wish list items that they wanted were incorporated. It was LEED Silver, and the Alberta government told them that it was the best use of the solar grant from any other project by 10 times. So that means the grant dollars invested per kilowatt production was 10 times more effective than any other grant applied. So going on to Thomas's point about culture, it is incredibly important. And this is how you can apply culture to any project. Doesn't matter the delivery method. I just wanted to explain that the contract can enable or not to make you more collaborative. So I put up this picture because if you've played a sport, you probably know that the rules are really clear. There are clear metrics. Everybody is focused on a common goal. And it's fun. It's fun because all of that is clear. But we don't do this with our corporate offices, and we don't really do this with our projects either. We don't make the culture intentional, and we don't make it clear. And so that's what we need to be doing more of in our projects. And that's how we can make a project more collaborative. All of those soft skills and learning about yourself that Thomas was talking about, completely true and so important. You can see with this statistic from these folks at Leadership IQ, what makes an employee fail in their first 18 months? It's not technical competence. That was 11%. It's all the other things: coachability, emotional intelligence, motivation. That's like 90% of the whole thing. So, these soft skills are really important. And that comes into play with how you can be collaborative and how you can work with others. If you haven't heard of emotional intelligence, I highly recommend learning more about it, because that's one of the top things that corporations are evaluating new hires for. And then on the flip side, not just the employee, but the manager side, there's a lot of research out there too on what makes a good manager. And again, one of the top things is doesn't communicate clear expectations. And so this is really important for the success of a project, but also if you're managing a team. No longer is it okay to be hard on your people to get them to do what you need. There is a saying in the lean world, be hard on the process, not on the people. Assume the best in your people and look to the process to improve it and catch where the mistake happened. Yeah, there's definitely a trend in no longer promoting people that are hard on others, because there is data as backed up by some of this research that shows that when you have a bad manager, doesn't matter how many benefits you can throw at a person. If your direct manager is not effective, people will just leave. So you still need to have these crucial conversations. You still need to be able to talk about when people don't agree and when stakes are high, and do that through an emotionally intelligent way. And this is part of these high-performing projects. Is teams that can really get this are amazing. Over and over again, we see that one of the biggest areas is people don't like to hold each other accountable. And that's a really big part of being a high-performing team, is the ability to do that in an effective way. And then as leaders, the role changes. Instead of telling people what to do, they're there to serve the team, to remove constraints in front of the team. And that all these leaders are now more of like a coach, and they should really flex their patient muscle to just repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat, because we're changing culture, we're changing mindsets, and people are going to fall back into their old ways of working. It's just human nature. So instead of the architect being seen as the top dog on a project, now the person that's most important is the person adding most value at any given point in the project. So that could actually be the tech CAD monkey, I think. I once was a CAD monkey myself, but that could be the person who's adding the most value at any given point. So that everybody else is around them, serving them to remove the constraints in their path so they can just fly through those drawings. And the same thing is true for trades. No longer, possibly is it the engineer or the foreman, it's the guy actually, or gal, installing the drywall that is adding the most value. So everybody should be centered around removing constraints. So on our jobs, the architect comes to job site once or twice a week and basically answers all their questions to remove their constraints. And that has worked out really great. You can actually quantify a high-performing team. So what we do at the very beginning is set up a whole bunch of goals, and then we measure our performance as a team against those goals. And if your team is up in the high 4s, you're doing well. But these indicators show us where we might need to shore up or look into something more. If your team is 2s, 2.5, 3, there's a lot of more work you could do to improve the performance of your team. So the next out of the 3 areas I want to talk about was process. And really a lot of what Thomas was talking about was the how. So on conventional projects, we have a very specific what we're doing, and there are definitely good tenets around the how. So there's project charters, documentation management. We do try to integrate the design team, so engineers and architects, and sometimes we even bring in a design assist from a contractor standpoint. And then, of course, there's just best practices in project management. But of course, what we do for high-performing projects, IPD projects, trying to make a project more collaborative is really beef up that part about how we work together. So as Thomas said, we really get clear on what our values are. We get clear on our project mission, the why. We get clear on the behaviors that are expected of the team, so that painting that picture, so we're like a sports team and we can just fly through and have fun and win together. We do team development, to build that bond, not just professionally, but personally. We do training if people don't know about Lean. We really do actually look at strengths-based. That's something that our team in particular focuses on, is the strength-based stuff. So if you already are coming to a team and you know your strengths, that's great. And we can leverage people in the IPD contract that we can't really on other contracts, because everybody's just paid hourly. So if you happen to be a mechanical engineer, but you're also extremely gifted at IT, I mean, look around us. We're all on Zoom all day, every day, and we're all using Microsoft Teams, or we're using other platforms. And oftentimes there's a lack of IT expertise on each project. So if you happen to have that extra expertise, you can be a resource. Your skills can be utilized. So it's definitely a strength-based thing is that we look at. And we set up metrics. We do quarterly updates on those metrics. We do pull planning and collaborative planning, and those things are checked on daily and weekly. We do a whole bunch more focused on the how. And this is where I'll tell you a little bit about Lean. It started in the Toyota, manufacturing, and it kind of has grown and expanded all over the world because Toyota was willing to share what they do. So all the other car manufacturers also follow Lean because they saw how much more revenue and profit Toyota was getting out of this process. And really what you're trying to do is enable absolutely everybody on your project to identify areas that could be improved, and then give them the autonomy and the mastery in order to improve it. And so you're really, again, as a leader, you're listening to your team and giving them areas where they can speak up and help. Another part of the collaboration, or how you can incorporate or improve collaboration, is actually meeting together. So on IPD projects, we meet in a big room and we co-locate. And why we do this is it removes the waste, when you think about lean, in waiting, because oftentimes a designer will put out a drawing to the team via email. Those people may not be ready right at that moment to review it, so they're waiting for them to review it. And then two people may come back to the designer with conflicting answers. So then we have to wait again in order to find time to talk and kind of sift through it. And instead, when you co-locate, you can just all talk at once right there and there. So you're saving all that time. And of course, we have had to transition to virtual co-location, and so far it's working. All of our IPD jobs are all online. Another aspect that you can apply to any project, regardless if it's IPD or not, is something called pull planning. And it is a collaborative based planning where, again, the people actually executing the work are planning their own work together, and they get to see the bigger picture of how their piece of the pie fits in with everything else. And they have to ask the question, in order for me to get my job done effectively, what needs to come before me? What has to be done ahead of me? And then really what we're looking at is the handoff as a relay race between everybody, which doesn't get as much focus as it should on a conventional project. And this is a really another big area where you can shrink time. And of course, we've had to a change to remote too. So this is one option. We actually had some people calling in and one person in the trailer moving the stickies. And we've also now moved to do it remote too. So we use tools like Miro and we do pull planning that way. So going back to my comment earlier about sustainability and how do we get there sooner and how does collaboration enable us to get there sooner? Definitely from our experience of working on so many high performing projects, whether that's any of the delivery methods, the more collaborative, the better. The more the client will get to a more concrete answer, can I actually reach net zero or not, sooner? And we'll have actual costing associated with that too, sooner, so they can make a go, no go decision. And I kind of did a little cartoon here. Hopefully it makes sense. I don't know, you guys are guinea pigs with my cartoon. But on the conventional process, as explained earlier, owner hires architect, architect does a design, a schematic, then the engineers are hired and they fit their stuff into the design. Then everybody works really hard to put that together into a beautiful package with no mistakes called the working drawings and specs. And that is basically the instructions for the contractors. And then the contractor breaks up all those instructions and gives them to different subtrades. Especially subtrades probably don't see all of the instructions. They only see a small part of it. So they don't see the whole picture. So it's design, engineering, construction, specialty trade. But the carbon neutral process or net zero process needs to be switched up in order to be most effective. So owners should come with their goals, their sustainability goals, and then they should really actually talk to the engineers first, and it could be an energy consultant, and they work with the operations team to see what do you do now, how do you operate now, and what is actually possible as far as consumption reduction and how far we can go. And then those goals can be given to the architect, who then can help inform their design. And that could be orientation of the building envelope, how many window to wall ratio, all that kind of stuff. And then we also want to loop in those specialty trades early on so that we can get the best and quickest data from them on the cost of the latest solar panels, because engineers, you guys know a lot, but it's the trades who are actually know the most about the recent stuff, like even what kind of delays in shipping or I'm forgetting the term of it, but sanctions from other countries or taxes from other countries, those things affect the cost and the viability. So the real big solution, which would work best, is if owner goes to an entire team and the team works together to figure out the target, and they set their goals and they set them within the budget. And then that team designs to that budget and constructs to that budget. And what does that sound like? Not the design bid build process, but the IPD process. This is actually a graphic of the IPD process for all those nerdy nerds like me. But basically, you assemble the team right away, and then you design to a price. And then during construction, you're just kind of borrowing down through the costs. And so you can give the client as much as they have asked for the least cost. And all of that, of course, is utilizing that early part of the project that costs the least to make changes. That's it. Any questions?
Hey, thank you very much. That was awesome. So yeah, now we're going to go into a quick Q&A. So here, I can start off with the first question. In one of you're talking about how important emotional intelligence is towards teamwork and working environments. What are some ways that you and Thomas, how have you two helped build your emotional intelligence skills?
I personally, it's been a self-directed path, but I'm a continuous improvement person at heart. And I also like to self-reflect. So, you know, there's a different assessments. EcoAML does a whole bunch of assessments. One that could be work style, it could be communication style, it could be just, you know, innate skill sets within who you are. And the more you learn about that, the more, to Thomas's point, you can share what your weaknesses are and what your strengths are. And emotional intelligence also goes deeper to really understanding how you're delivering a message. So if you understand from your peer that their communication style is supportive, but you are a driver, then instead of just being to the point and no friendly fluff, you might want to add a little fluff because they'll appreciate it and they won't feel like maybe, you know, internalized that they've maybe done something wrong because you've been too direct. And vice versa. If you're a supportive person and you're wanting to send a message to a direct person, just get to the point. Otherwise, they're going to not respect you as much because you're all over the place. So it's really asking people to learn about people to better get the best result out of them. And that's communication and productivity. But then also learning about yourself and sharing that with others so that they can get the best out of you. And it takes a lot of vulnerability, takes a lot of honesty with yourself. The more honest you can be, the better outcome you can have.
Cool.
I don't know if you have an addition, Thomas, but.
Yeah, no, those are some really great points, Stephanie. I was going to add that really kind of emphasize that self-awareness is an incredible asset to anyone that's involved in a team environment. And when we're a designer or constructor, whatever part you play in this greater process, an owner even, if you're not self-aware, there's going to be some significant challenges that you will carry into a project environment. And when you are self-aware, there's a lot of ways that you can leverage not only your own strengths and the things that you've developed yourself, but that you can encourage and uplift the team of people around you. So I think developing self-awareness and even recognizing that that needs to be developed is a key element. And then I think that kind of gives you people a starting point, and maybe it helps to work on something that's not necessarily as personally intensive. Maybe it's starting with something like Toastmasters, where you learn to give and receive feedback, as well as public speaking. And by the time you've developed a bit more of strength internally about giving and receiving feedback, maybe it's an opportunity to become a little bit more receptive to taking that to a deeper personal level. But I know for me, it's been a long journey of growth, and all aspects of life, if it's project-based or even if it's just marriage itself, taking all of those and being real and accepting input from people around you is kind of the key component. But Enneagram for me has been a really big tool. Certainly something I recommend that can provide a lot of benefit too.
Cool, thank you. Okay, we have a question in the Q&A tab. So the question is, in an IPD process, what are some of the metrics used to select the team if cost is not the criteria?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really is about, first and foremost, because culture can make or break a project. It's about the attitude of the people that will be hired. So everybody is interviewed. Everybody goes through an interview process. But in addition to that, when you're answering an RFP and in your proposal, you would put in any kind of past experience on collaboration. You will be asked questions about, if there was an issue on the job site, how did you solve that? And if your answers are more collaborative, then that's great. You don't necessarily have to have IPD experience. It of course helps, but it's really about that attitude of the collaborative problem solvers and inclusiveness and, thinking about all the different perspectives on a project team, not just your own silo. And then the other part that is usually asked on an IPD proposal is your hourly rates and the profit pool percentage that you're hoping for.
Cool, thank you. Thomas, do you have anything to add, or is that?
Yeah, I was going to say that price still does weigh in, but it's amazing when we realize the impacts of focusing on developing the quality team, that the price can have a lesser function or a lesser role in determining best project outcome. And as we know, it kind of see from research is that it is delivering projects that are at a lower cost and with fewer changes. So it is certainly still a component. But I think in many respects, it better aligns with the ability of, I know for myself as a consulting engineer, qualifications-based selection and the ability to select professional services on their basis of their experience, their record, the personnel that they would be putting forward as being available, all of those elements that define their qualifications, that is a really, really key component, and that aligns quite a bit more strongly with integrated project delivery.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so if you're sending somebody to an interview, don't send the BD people, send the actual people who are going to work on the project, because that's who the owner wants to meet. And to Thomas's point, there are people that will be part of the ICL or the profit pool, and there are people that won't be. So there's still some more conventional building or pricing that goes along in the IPD process. But Thomas made a good point that in those circumstances, when you are providing a fee, it really is not the only decision maker, and the relationships and the good, past experience with that consultant plays a big role in making that decision.
Awesome. Okay, we have time for a couple more questions. So again, if you have any questions, type them in the Q&A tab. So here's a question from me. Stephanie, in your slides about culture, you talked about you had a plot of how you quantified your teams based on their teamwork. So some teams had a 4, some had a 2. Just was wondering if you could expand on that a bit, and how do you rank a group of people on to get a number?
Yeah, so just like a sports team, we want metrics to know that we're going in the right direction and we're winning. And so we want that for the culture too. So as a team, we brainstorm behaviors that we think are, and we've felt in the past and are based off of science that will enable a team to be really high performing. And then we do a survey, quarterly or whatever the cadence is that makes most sense for the project, to measure our own performance against those metrics that we said we would do. And so, there's usually different categories, and so that you could dive into one, whether that be one of the categories is teamwork or one of the categories is communication. You can dive into that and say, okay, how can we better? What are things that are not working well? So yeah, just a survey and honest responses.
Cool. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think that, oh, we got one more question, just in time. So we have a question here, hang on. So, is the choice to complete a project as an IPD made by the client at the start, and then multiple IPD proposals are submitted? Or does the client, such as EPSB, decide they want an IPD, and then the interview process is to choose the specific IPD team?
Yes, so the choice to go IPD has to be made by the owner. And the Mosaic Center was one of the first projects in Alberta to go use the formal IPD contract. And we weren't IPD at the first because we didn't even know about it. We just knew we wanted to do lean construction. And then through that, reaching out to the Lean Construction Institute, we realized, oh, there's a contract. And so we actually had to have a go, no go moment where we said, okay, guys, and it was driven by the owner. This is it. We're going to do this. And we, some of the team was skeptical. They weren't sure. But in the end, everybody bought in and we did it. It was the best decision we made. But that decision has to come from the client, because then they go through a process of hiring the people, and hiring the people through the IPD process is different than conventional. There are projects that have gone through the hiring on a design build and then switched. And that is, there's little bumps in the road there, but it's possible. But you really can't switch from design bid build to IPD because the people aren't hired at the right times.
Cool. Okay, we have another question. So this question is, you've mentioned the team and individual EQ as being very important. I think this is true on projects of any type of contract. How do we look for those types of skills on any project team? And could these EQ skills at the team level not help the projects with almost any type of contracts? Can we review those EQ qualifications at the IPD proposal time too, if going that way?
Definitely, I 100% agree. The culture, the ability to collaborate, the emotional intelligence, all would serve any project, regardless of the contractual type. I know on our projects, I don't necessarily know how you would change that on a design bid build project, other than how you would on an IPD project, which is through the interview process, and asking open-ended questions. So you want to have a set of questions that are not leading questions, which is really hard for people. It gets awkward, but you want to ask them questions that would kind of test some of that emotional intelligence and let them speak to the stories and how they would handle things. And that Hiring for Attitude book that I had showed earlier has a lot of that in there of how to do that. And then, I mean, everybody's going to be at a different page. It's not the end all be all. It's just like a piece of data that now okay, this person answers some great questions a great way. They could probably end up being a coach or a leader, and this person ended this way, and their skill sets and their technical competence are still awesome and we want them, but just know that, maybe we'll incorporate some sort of training on the job as well. If we have commitment from the team to spend some time tokens to actually build an education component of this culture, then yeah, we've done actually like book studies, like where we're reading articles and then we're sharing that in the project meeting. It's there's different ways to do it.
Cool.
Yeah, I'd quickly add to that in an IPD process of hiring the teams, there's a lot of different ways that it can be done. If an owner wants to start with the architect and then move on to the general contractor, or if they want to pick teams of general contractor and architect together, or if they want to pick the trade partner with their trade consultant together, there are so many different ways. But what's unique about IPD with the interview process is it allows the owner to be a lot more thorough in their selection of their team. If it was a design build process or design bid build, that generally if the owner is selecting the architect could have a team of highly EQ quality individuals, but some of their sub-consultants may not actually be at that same level. And that's a challenge with some of those more conventional models, where the ability of the owner to become as thorough in their selection and to be as influential in that kind of selection may not be there, and something like that can certainly be realized a lot more effectively in an IPD contract.
Great, awesome, thank you. Okay, so that wraps up everything. Just wanted to say as a thank you, the CEA we'll be giving an honorarium to Engineers Without Borders for $50 as a thank you to Stephanie and Thomas for your time. So again, thanks again, and also thank you to Indrajit for helping host the platform, and everyone for attending. That was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot, and hopefully people did as well. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was a pleasure.
Cheers.